no time for that, Pat, because we got to talk about the Justice Department creating a new domestic terrorism unit. And been talking about this for a long time. They're looking at a new domestic war on terror, and they're adding another piece to their network that they're putting together here. And this unit seems to be a part of it, Pat. Man, how scary is it to have another federal agency, running around with the idea of likely entrapping people just like they do with, the jihadist terrorism threat?
Yeah, it's terrifying. I mean, especially because one thing we were talking about, I might start doing work on some of these COVID cases. And one of the attorneys I've been talking about it with has been saying that she's afraid of this because, if parents who are going to or school board meetings are labeled domestic terrorists, well, how are the attorneys who are challenging these COVID mandates in court going to be treated? And how are they going to look at us? And I think it's terrifying. And one thing I wonder with these units is, like, what kind of tactics are they going to use? Are they going to be tapping people's phones and trapping people? The other thing that I really worry about is, well, maybe on the good side, you mentioned all these agencies. Is this going to be like a 9/11 situation where, like, the CIA and the FBI are fighting with each other and things get through the cracks? Like, is this going to be another kind of like clan that has their own tribalist agendas, and maybe that will gum up the works? What do you think? Is that too optimistic?
I think so. My guess is that they're just going to like tap into the information provided by the other agencies, kind of like what we saw with the Operation Whistle Pig that the Customs and Border Patrol was carrying out, spying on American journalists under the name of vetting them. And so they were vetting them to hopefully use them to plant psyop informations about how bad forced labor was and everything like that, or that the U.S. had ability to crack down on forced labor that it didn't in Central America and all that. But in there, they just use like the FBI, NSA, and all that in their databases to enhance their abilities. And so I'm guessing that's what's going to happen here. But, cops are terrible, so they do get in their own way at times too, and their incompetence is one of the few things that gives me hope.
What do you make about this whole thing that there is no specific federal domestic terrorism statute? I mean, I'm sure that's going to change very quickly, but what do you think about that?
I mean, I guess like in a sense there isn't one, but it's not like there isn't crimes that you would commit in the course of it. And so I feel like in a sense terrorism is maybe more of a cultural and social term than a legal term, right? So like if you're guilty of murdering people, does it really matter? And like, it could matter in sentencing, let's say, or something like that. But in like a strictly like charging sense, does it really matter, Pat, if somebody kills 9 people, if it's because they're a terrorist who believes in jihad and wants to like kill like the white Satan America, or if it's Dylan Roof who wants to kill a bunch of black people because he's a terrible bigot, or you know what I mean? Like I understand that like at sentencing it could matter and stuff like that, but does it really matter if he's charged with terrorism or not? If you're guilty of that kind of crime, your life is over. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to get out of jail. And so at best, and I'm not a fan of the death penalty anyway, so what would really be the point of having a specific terrorism charge other than just to have like a loose thing that like you can maybe stack, right? So then you could charge people with more different things so they feel like they have to plead guilty to lesser charges or something like that. I just don't understand what the end goal would be of it.
Well, I mean, I think you're making a mistake here, Kyle. You're making the assumption that these are good people who are just maybe a little misguided, but they really care about, the health and safety of the American people. And here the reality is that they're not good actors. I'm being facetious with you, but they're not good actors here. And I think that the whole part of this is that they just want more control. They want more powers to pursue these ends. There's a political element to this with talking about, the establishment really loves this whole January 6th narrative, and I think that going forward, it's ushering in the new panoptic surveillance society, where they can just label anyone whatever they want. Domestic terrorism will fit you into this, and now you're going to be an enemy of the state. And moreover, before I forget about this, what I think that they're going to do, and we've seen this before, and maybe you can opine on this too, is that at January 6th, what they really started to do was recruit the help of the American people in catching these people. And there's this documentary on Netflix called Don't F with Cats. I don't know if you've seen that, but
I
it,
haven't, but I know the idea of it.
it's normalizing this whole snitch culture and recruiting people who will do the legwork of these intelligence agencies for them by analyzing social media posts and things like that. It's the snitch on your neighbor surveillance state from Nazi Germany or the Stasi or North Korea, or pick your totalitarian regime.
Yeah. And just to point out, there's a real risk to this because, not that so obviously I am a fan of citizen journalism, right? Like, doing your own online investigative research is important. However, you have to be important not to get caught up in a hysteria. And one of the dangerous things here is that the government is talking about having people target individuals, right? Like, I'm talking about like what the US government is doing and everything like that, right? I'm not saying that we should, go after, soldier Joe Schmo who lives down the block because of Yemen. That's in no way my messaging or anything like that. But they are targeting individuals. There's another Netflix documentary, I think it's called like Disappearance or Mystery at the Cecil Hotel. And in it, like at the very beginning, there's this girl doing weird things in the elevator, and she turns out to have fallen into the water tank. Complete waste of 4 hours. Don't watch the thing. Very obviously, that she was having a mental health crisis when I watched the first 30 seconds, and then they used some pretty slick editing to turn it into a 4 hour long documentary. But towards the end of it, what happened is like the online community really started getting in and looking into her disappearance. And so they find this video of this creepy looking guy from Mexico. And and when I say creepy looking, he's one of your types like death metal, but low budget death
Right.
metal type. And he makes this song about like being creepy in the hotel. And he posts it in just absolute coincidence 1 year to the day before the girl disappears. And so without any like I guess just like CNN level messing up, like just looking at the wrong dates and getting the numbers wrong, they pin it on this guy, and to the point where he actually attempts to kill himself. Like, he attempts to commit suicide because everybody believes he did. Of course, the cops know that he was in Mexico on the day that she disappeared because he was signing a like legal document, like a record label contract, right? Like, not the kind like a notary is there, right? He was definitely in Mexico on that day. The police don't come out with that. The guy doesn't play music anymore or anything because of what these people did to him, right? With their online mob mentality. And that's the same thing that could happen here. And it's very careful not to go after normal people for this kind of crazy stuff. And that is what the government is really trying to ramp people up to do. So fantastic point, Pat.
Yeah, and you and I, one of the first times that I was on when you were still doing Foreign Policy Focus, you and I did an episode about FBI entrapment schemes, and we really got into it on that, and I'm really proud of that episode. So I should find it, and we should put it in the show notes page, because that goes over like a lot of the tactics, and it's I talk about in that a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about when you brought up, does it really matter what the motivations of these people are for committing these crimes? We really dissect that because, and you address that. You address this. I'm not critiquing you, but it does matter in the Western system of law. The particular case and the mens rea does matter, but your point stands exactly, is that, once you get to a certain point, what really is the motivation for these things on the enforcement end, I don't think really matters. It does matter for sentencing and culpability, but on the other end, it doesn't. We don't need a specific task force, a federal task force to evaluate certain types of crimes. I mean, Is arson motivated by revenge in this case, or is it motivated by, insurance fraud? We
Right.
don't need two different task force to take care of that problem.
Right. And I'm in no way trying to like diminish the crimes of people like Dylan Roof or Omar Mateen. I'm just saying that like when when you're talking about court, you know that they killed all those people, right?
Right.
Like there's no question about it. They're definitely going to jail for absolute life. So does it really matter if they're, charged and convicted of a terrorism charge? Now, I think it's far more interesting and far more important for that to just be a separate cultural debate for people to have, like how do we feel about these crimes in particular and the people who committed them and their motives for them and how do you stop those particular crimes? But there's nothing that's going to be done within the courtroom to reform, to stop it, or to like really I think like do anything to like heal or anything like that. That's I think much more likely going to be done like on a social and cultural level. One last point I want to make here, Pat, is just there's something really backwards. Oh, never mind. One more thing I want to say. Because of that episode of that foreign policy focus show we did, immediately after the Gretchen Whitmer case broke, I called it. I said that there's a huge number of these guys that are FBI informants in this clearly an entrapment plot, and I've been 100% vindicated on that one. And
Yeah.
again, I like within 2 or 3 days of that instant, me and Will were on the show talking about, and I was absolutely saying that I think this is an entrapment plot. But the last point I want to make on the show today, Pat, is just that there's really something backwards here, right? Where, you have like this Black Lives Matter movement that's mainly, at least its motivation or what rallies people to the biggest, levels is because the police are racist and abuse people, right? Like that's their main George Floyd, Michael Brown, things like that are what start Black Lives Matter protests and rallies to go on, right? But then at the same time we're empowering the police more, right? But it's not, I mean, there are situations like Ahmaud Arbery where there are citizens who do kill black men like they're cops and act like they're cops and things like that, right? But it's far more likely that like if you're going to have a situation where like it is clearly racial abuse and like a really disgusting thing going on, like this case in Ohio where a couple of cops pulled a paraplegic black man out of his car by his hair. He's sitting there crying to him like, hey, let somebody come, I'm a paraplegic, I can't get out of my car. And they keep yelling at him, get out of your car, we're gonna remove you from your car. And so they decide to do that by his hair. The police department decided that this, despite looking bad, wasn't that violent of a way to remove him from his car. And so, nobody's going to get fired or anything for that. Very unfortunate and disturbing. But I mean, honestly, if you really want to cut down on this kind of crime, Pat, I think you would really want to look into like the actions of police departments and police officers and not necessarily this domestic terrorism force directed at regular average citizens. You have an AP report from like a month ago about there's essentially just a network of white supremacists that operate within the Florida prison guard community. Why they're pretty open about their beliefs and they're just able to like work in these facilities still. Also, not to mention the disturbing thing about the U.S. trained neo-Nazis in Ukraine and that being the Florida National Guard. But talk about that a different day and just mention that like there's absolutely no looking at trying to examine the actions of the state and their enforcement methods for what they're doing to us and the problems that they're causing, and it's all being targeted back at the civilians. And that's just another example with this new domestic terrorism force. So any last thoughts, Pat? Anything I missed?
No, I mean, just it's the meme FBI foils FBI terrorist plot. And I think you make a great point because a lot of this is, I mean, this is all motivated by government policy that, even the COVID, like if you think that people going to their school board meetings and getting pissed off and even getting extreme or violent, if you think that that is terrorism, well, it's completely created by a government policy in the first place. So, yeah. But thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure, man.
Yeah,